In trading, knowledge is power, and lack of knowledge in what you're doing can be costly, very costly. So you need a solid foundation of quality market education. Whether you're new to trading or a seasoned veteran looking to add advanced strategies to your arsenal, there's always something to learn and something to improve on. And now you can access the same knowledge that professional traders receive with Market Rebellion's Trading Education. I'm Bill Johnson, Head of Options Education here at Market Rebellion, and we've assembled a comprehensive curriculum based on decades of real trading experience, covering everything you need to know about trading options from beginner to advanced. We go way beyond the nuts and bolts of options theory to teach you how to apply specific trading strategies and the techniques needed to adapt your trades when markets shift. Regardless of your goals, you'll gain access to the education you need with easy-to-consume lessons so you can learn to trade with confidence, enhance your knowledge, and master the practical skills required for market success. So please join us for in-depth trading education only from Market Rebellion. And good afternoon, Market Rebels. It's time for Coach's Corner. But Stu, I just had to check my clock. It seems like something's off here. It is Wednesday at 4 p.m. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people are going, hey, wait a minute. This is supposed to be on Thursday. And that is true. Normally we are a Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. But today we're doing a tiny shift to do it on Wednesday because we've got a big special event tomorrow, don't we?
We do. We have a presentation.
We have the Trading Superstorms, Unlock Expert Trading Secrets as we answer questions live. Got a pretty good panel. We've got a couple of special guests that'll be there as well. Some very big names, so we won't release those ahead of time, but it'll be a lot of fun. So please be sure to join us there.
Sure.
You can go to marketrebellion.com/register. Pretty simple, /register, and just a free event, but just sign in there, and we'd love to have you. So we'll be doing that tomorrow during our regular Coach's Corner time. So Stu, for Coach's Corner, let's start off like we always do with a Chalk Talk question, little thought-provoking question. This one is going to appear even easier than ones that we've presented before, but like all of them, there's a little subtle twist that you got to be careful of. So here's our question. You bought shares at 100, stock falls 20% to 80 bucks. What percent increase would you need to make up the losses over the next year? Now, again, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, oh, that's really easy.
Well, it looks really easy, Bill.
Yeah, what do you think most people are going to do there?
Well, let's see. I'll just run through it real quick. So down 20% to 80. So in order to get back to my 20 bucks that I lost on 80, that would be 25%.
25% going in the other direction, right? That's what most people will say. And,
I think so.
You know, all things being equal, you could certainly make an argument for that. And what we wanted to do was to just really show you something else to consider, why that's probably not a good way to think about the math. And so it's really on a bigger scale, we want to show you why you have to be careful about deviating from, let's say, the S&P 500 or the SPYs or a broad-based index to go into an individual stock. Because we all know that the broad-based indexes aren't as volatile typically as an individual stock. And so and that's because you've got so many stocks in there. If you get a few of them that are down, you've got lots of others that are up that tend to counterbalance it. But if you pick an individual stock and you end up dropping 20% or 40%, a lot of times people think, oh, well, let me just hang on to it for 6 months or a year and see if I can make it back because they also earn more. I'm going to show you why that's probably not as easy as it sounds.
Let me guess, Bill, you're going to show us mathematically how that opportunity cost is going to erode your returns.
Right track. Exactly right. Yep. You got the idea. It's always the opportunity cost that people overlook.
Everyone, don't misconstrue this as don't buy any individual stocks.
Of course
we're not saying that. Just the middle of the road, the not money in the bank, but almost money in the bank over long periods of time is the S&P. It's got that long-term upward bias. You kind of bank on that. Any specific, time frame could deviate from that. Will deviate from that. But over the big picture, it goes from left to right, from lower to higher. Right. Individual stocks don't necessarily carry that, but that doesn't mean that you can't invest in them as well. They just need to be a really much smaller piece of the entire investment portfolio.
Right. The anchor, the bulk of the portfolio should be in some type of a broad-based index or indexes, maybe the QQQs and things like that as well. But you have to be careful about branching out or venturing out onto the individual stocks for the reasons that we're going to show you. So like Stu said, we're not saying that it's wrong. That's what people do. That's what investors do. But you have to also understand the devastation that can occur if it doesn't go your way. So let's start off talking about losses here. All right, so buying individual stocks increases the chance for losses compared to a broad-based index. So if you want to grow the overall portfolio, which should be your goal, you must make up those losses. And that doesn't mean it has to be in the same stock, but you do need to make up those losses. You're digging holes. And so even if you have lots of small losses, a lot of times people think, oh, I only took, I capped it at 10% or I capped it at 20%. Well, but there's still holes. You still have losses that you have to make up. So, but you end up with two key problems from trying to make up these losses. First one, as Stu just mentioned, your percentages are harder to make up from a smaller base. So if the stock goes from 100 to 80, that's a 20% drop, a 20% fall on a base of 100. But going in the other direction, we have that same 20 bucks we have to make up, but on a base of 80. And so because stocks move in percentages, that stock now has to move 25% to make that up. What would it be, Stu, if it took a 50% hit?
You just need a bigger movement to make it.
You need 100%.
That's the big statement. You just need a bigger movement. And of course, bigger movements carry lower probabilities.
Yep.
Now,
so
let me say one thing here. So buying individual, first bullet point, buying individual stocks increases the chance for loss. I bet that a ton of the people that are watching it are saying at that point, while buying individual stocks also increases the chance for winners. True. So look, that is true. That is true. But here's a little sidebar. We've talked about this many times, Bill. People have an aversion to losing money.
Yep.
And when they get a gain, they like to take it.
Right.
And those winners are then like clipped. We don't allow them to run as they should. So we wind up taking bigger losses because we kind of hang out. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it'll come back while we're clipping the winners. Yep. And that in the long run doesn't really work.
It's not a winning recipe.
It's not a winning recipe.
But now, not only are the percentages harder to make up, because remember, stock prices move in percentages. So again, if it takes a 50% hit, not that we've ever seen a stock fall 50%, now it needs 100% to rise. And that's a very steep hill to climb. But the second problem is you should consider that you have to make up the opportunity cost of not buying the index. Because if you go back to square one, when you say, okay, I want to buy this individual stock, you could have put that money into, let's say, the S&P 500. By choosing not to, if you really want to look at what you would have to make up, had you done that, that index is probably chugging along.
I feel like we're kind of getting into the whole compounding issue here.
And the whole compounding, and it's going to just tend to run away from you.
Look, if you have, we'll just take a little segment of time. Let's just say, it's 8% a year on the S&P. It's actually a little higher, but let's use a conservative number, 8%. So 8% that you would have made over a period of that 1 year on average, but you lost 25% in this other one. It's like a double whammy, right?
That's
you
right.
have to take that opportunity cost into consideration.
Yep. So here's what we were talking about before. If we have the $100 stock that falls to 80, that's a 20% drop. And you now need a 25% increase to make that up. But what traders fail to recognize is that technically this $100, had you put it in the SPY, is probably at 108 or 110 because it's still continuing to chug along and to move. So like Stu said, it's really more of a double whammy. And that just shows that those losses are really a lot harder to make up than you might expect. So we'll look at some examples here on an Excel spreadsheet. Now, before we do, please be sure to visit us at marketrebellion.com/get started. Lots of great articles, tutorials, videos on there, all for free to help you get a good solid footing in the world of options. So this whole idea of opportunity cost, while you're trying to make up the losses, the overall market is rising too, at least most likely. So you must make up the gains you miss by not investing in the SPY. That's really the whole idea behind it. All right, so to see why, we're going to spend most of our time. Normally we have slides and animations and things. Let's pull up an Excel spreadsheet and take a look at what's going on here. Now, give me just a moment to explain this here to everyone, Stu. I'm going to make this 0 up here to start with. All right, so what we've got is, let's say the S&P 500, and let's just say it's trading at 100, or you've got $100 into it. You've got, this is investment number 1, and investment number 2 was 100. At one time, these were both 100, and it's now fallen to 80.
And what, Bill, it's like what? Just XYZ stock? It doesn't really matter.
Exactly, right. And I've programmed this to where we can change it, and we'll look at some numbers. But right now, I'm just assuming that it has fallen 20% from 100 to 80. So now I can also put in here the investment 1 or the SPY return. So if you want to assume that's going to climb 6%, we can put 6%, 10%, you pop that in there. So I'm just going to leave it at 8%. So take a look what's happening in year 1. If we kept it in the SPY, that would climb to 108. And if you had it in the stock that was now worth 80, you would actually need it to climb 35%, or a multiple of 1.35 to catch, because you're not trying to catch 100, you're trying to catch 108. So think about it. If you have the 25 that we talked about, 25%, right, going from 80 to 100, but you've also got another $8, and $8 on 80 is what? 10%. There's another 10 percentage points in there.
Where's that?
That's nothing to sneeze at.
No, not at all. That's especially when you go out over time. I mean, that.
Oh yeah, you're gonna, right.
Compounding effect, it just gets massive. It's a massive number. Think about paying like a 10% management fee to your, local investment. Right. I mean, it's a killer.
So if that's a 35% required return, and we just saw that most people would think that it was 25%. The actual return comes in when we start looking at if we underperform. We'll look at that in a second. So again, your balance would be at 108, and your percentage below would be 0. You're exactly matching it if you got 35%. Right? If you got 35% in the year, your balance would be 108. The person that invested in SPY would be 108. You've made up the losses. You're 0% behind. But now you have to say, how likely is it for me to make 35% in 1 year when the overall market's returning 8%?
Well,
that's the big question.
I'm going to say probably not too likely.
Probably not too good. All right.
You might do it, but it's the exception. It's the anomaly.
Oh,
it's something you can't bank on. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And if it's that volatile of a stock, it also means you could be further in the hole. So you might say, all right, well, let me hold out for year 2. Is that going to be more likely to happen? Well, now if you had invested in SPY, 8% plus 8% compounding would be worth 116. That $80 position now needs a multiple of 1.46, which that's a 46% across 2 years, which turns out to be 20.7% per year. So now you need 21% per year for 2 years without missing, just to get to 116.64. Are you going to do 21% for 2 consecutive years when the overall market's doing 8%? It's getting
You're probably going
dicey.
to job with Goldman Sachs if you're going to do that.
Exactly. So you can see what's happening after 3 years. If you were in SPY, it would be worth about 126. Your $80 position would need to be multiplied by 1.57. And that turns out to be over 3 years, about 16% per year in order to catch that.
That you would need to make help. Yeah.
So you can see that if we plot this, now it does decrease. It will eventually converge on 8%. There's a mathematical reason for that. But look at how, especially in the earlier years, the sizes of those returns. But even out here, I mean, if you go out 20 years, you would need 9.2% every single year without fail for 20 straight years to make up when the market's chugging along at 8%, just from that one hit.
Which you're not going to do.
You have to say that, the odds are just so against you.
They're not going to do it. You might do it. But
so now that brings us up to an interesting point. What if we had one bad year in there? All right, so let's just say, for starters, I'm going to go out 5 years.
Happens.
We need 12.9% per year, every year for 5 years to make up this $20 loss. Mm-hmm. But what if we had just one bad year? We have 4 good years of 12.9%, but we have one bad year. Mm-hmm. So now that's what this is. I'm going to say number of negative years. Let's make that 1. And let's say we have a 10% drop. Mm-hmm. So our stock that we've decided to hold has 4 years of 12.9%, but it has 1 year of minus 10. Mm-hmm. Now look what happens. Now you're 20% below. You thought you were going to be at 146.93. You're at 117. You are 20% below just from one bad year. Look at this. After 20 years, you're 18% below. That's if you had 19 straight years of 9.2% and only 1 year of minus 10%. And look at how far behind you are. Do we dare go for, what if we have 20% loss? Look at that. After 20 years, you'd be 26% down.
Yeah.
What if you have 2 bad years of 10%? Kind of about the same, about 17%. I'm sorry, 2 bad years. Now you're down 32%.
So here's what I'm thinking. I'm kind of thinking about myself in my younger days. Here's a real quick story. I used to trade on the floor, as you know, Bill, and everyone who knows me out there knows I traded on the floor for many years. Every stock that I traded, this is before computers, every stock that I traded, I would actually buy 1 share of stock. Mm-hmm. The reason for that was so I could get on the mailing list, so I could get all the proxy materials and all that nonsense, right? It wasn't available because we didn't have
reports, all that stuff, yeah.
Right, all that stuff. So I had like hundreds of 1 shares. I still have some of those, believe it or not.
Wow.
And like Union Pacific, Home Depot, IBM, I just bought a lot of those kind of things. 1 share, sometimes bought a couple shares, sometimes I bought 5 shares, nothing. Basically, in the big picture, really no money. I mean, the Home Depot was like $20. The Union Pack was like $40. I mean, it was nothing, it was a dinner. It was a cheap dinner. It was nothing. It was nothing I was ever. But the point is, I still have them. And that's what I was talking about before. You got to let those, a lot of them failed. A lot of them went away. A lot of them got bought out. A lot of them went to zero. I had like Playboy Enterprises, a lot of Charming Shops. A lot of that nonsense went to zero. Circuit City, I had Circuit City. Yep. That went to zero. But, and they went to zero. So I lost $10, I lost $20, I lost $50, I lost this, that, and all. But some of them, like Home Depot, went from 1 share to $413 as we speak,
Yep.
which turned out to be 30 shares.
Yep.
30
Crazy.
shares
Yep.
of Home Depot. I'm not going to do the math. It's a lot of money. I mean, and you get a few winners like that because you never really thought about selling them. You weren't looking for the money. You didn't even know the money was there. You just bought them because you bought them. And that's the idea. If you want to invest in individual stocks, do it. Not a ton of them, not a ton of money based on the portfolio, but some of them, and just let them cook and just let them sit. Right? Some of them are going to go away, and some of them won't go away.
And Stu, we were just looking at that with NVIDIA the other day, weren't we? In 1999, what was it? $12 IPO?
$12.
And what did we say it was today? 6 million?
Yeah.
And how many? I forgot how many shares it would have turned into.
100 shares, maybe, I think. Or
it was at least 100 shares.
I don't know. It was some dumb, stupid amount. It was nothing.
48,000. It was some incredible number, but it was about $6 million on a $1,200 investment.
Right. So now you got the whole AI buzz, people. Well, which one's going to be the big one? I don't know. I have no idea. There's probably 30 stocks out there that are coming public or already public that are trying to, be the next Microsoft of the new era or the next Apple. Which one's it going to be? I don't know. Buy them all.
Right.
Buy them all. Buy a couple shares of all of them. Most will go away. Some won't. And the ones that won't become tremendous winners. Let the winners run.
Let the winners run.
Minimize the losses by just having the really small pieces and don't even care about them.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. There's nothing wrong with going into the individual stocks. I guess there's nothing wrong with putting it all into one stock. You just have to realize that is highly, highly speculative. And for this reason, if they go into losses, not even major losses, but just some kind of a loss, the chances of making them up become very slim. Let's go back and do another one with 0 bad years, but let's make it a 40% hit, Stu. Look at this. After 5 years, you would need 20% per year for 5 straight years to make up that loss when the market's returning 8%. You're going, it's just a really tough hill to climb out of.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that saying you told me the other day, Bill? Something about a hole, dig a hole, or what was that?
Oh, yeah. Warren Buffett, I think, said, if you ever find yourself in a hole, stop digging. That's great. Yeah. But this is one of the reasons that he's also saying this. It's very hard to dig yourself out.
Yeah.
Now, the math shows out. I've also programmed this. If we wanted to look at the next 20 years, we can change that to 21. And you can see that it will eventually come down and converge onto this. But even this, after 40 years, you would need 9.4% every year without fail to catch that when the market's only doing 8%. And I think that's something that traders just fail to overlook. They say, all right, big deal that I took a 20% hit. It's a very big deal. It's hard to catch.
Yeah.
It's very hard to catch. But this also brings up another side note with what? This is where options, you can do things like stock replacement. You can bolster some returns, get some leverage, guard the downside. There are some strategies you can do that can help to dig you out of these situations. And those are things we love to talk about in our Q&A, or if you want to hook up with Stu or Scotty for coaching lessons. But we just thought this was something that would be interesting to run by for all of you out there on YouTube. So just be careful when you venture into individual stocks. Like Stu said, go light. If they fail, not a lot of harm done. If they boom, there's probably a good reason. Probably because
people think you got to bet the ranch. People think you got to dump.
That's exactly. They want to exactly. Oh, I think this stock is going to be the next Nvidia. Let me go out on margin and borrow and buy every share I can.
You don't have time. Time takes care of that.
Time takes care of that.
Yeah.
Same with Bitcoin. Everybody said, oh, it ran to 70,000. And if you had put in $50, you'd be worth millions. Now I got to go mortgage my house and buy $1 million worth of Bitcoin. You're like, no, put in a couple $100.
No.
If you really think it's going to run that hard again, that's, a whole separate story. But people fail to recognize that if you really think it's going to be an explosive stock, go light. Go light on it. And the reason is that if you start digging a hole, they're very hard to dig out of once you understand your opportunity costs. So with that, Stu, let's go back to our slides here. Chalk Talk. Let's see how everybody did. You bought shares at 100, stock falls to 80. What percent increase would you need to make up the losses over the next year? Now, of course, we didn't put it in the question here. It was to see if people would think about it. But what we're looking for is, did you consider taking in the opportunity cost? And depending on what opportunity costs you wanted to use, you could come up with different numbers. But we're just looking that you did not say 25%. So using 8%, we found out would be what? You'd really need 35% that next year.
And that opportunity cost, look, that doesn't have to be the S&P. It could be, it could be a real estate venture. It could be, it could be anything. It doesn't really matter. It's just that whatever it is there, and it has to be considered.
Yep. It was the next best opportunity at the time you placed that trade. And had you not taken this individual stock, we have to say, well, how is that doing? Because that's really what you would have to account for, that opportunity cost. So that's it for Coach's Corner for today. So last reminder, please join us for Trading Superstorms. That'll be tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Go to marketrebellion.com/register. Absolutely free. We've got 2 surprise guests that'll be coming with us. And that's all that we have today. Any closing comments, Stu?
It's funny you said something about the Bitcoin. So a buddy of mine was asking me about a couple of different stocks that he was thinking about buying, and he said, one guy said to him, "Hey, you should buy some Bitcoin." And my friend Mike said, "You're out of your mind. I'm not buying that. You know what? Who knows what that's going to do? It's too volatile. It's too this. It's too that." And I said, he is 100% correct. You should buy it, but just buy, buy $100 worth.
Exactly.
Buy something that you're just going to rip up anyway, doing something stupid that, just buy
Park it and forget it. What you don't want to do, and this is what most people do, let me take $1,000 and I'll get in and I'll get out, and I'll make $50, and they try to trade it because it's so volatile. That's just inviting losses. That's a really bad idea. So if you're going to do it, take $100, take $1,000, put it in there, let it burn, let it sit there. And if it turns out to be explosive, it might be well worth it. But what you don't want to do is to mortgage the house to buy all the coins that you can. And we see that a lot.
No.
So I think with that, that is everything. We want to thank all of you for joining us. Next week, we will be back on at a regularly scheduled time. That'll be Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern, and we'll see you then.
See ya.